This is the Elite Game Developers podcast about the entrepreneurs and investors building the games companies of the future. Hey, shall we get going?
Yeah.
Yes, let's do it. We were chatting about doing this webinar like a few months ago, and then we postponed it a bit, but then I'm really happy to go and start talking about playtesting with you. I think this is a realm which is sort of like, I don't know, underappreciated in some parts of gaming. So gaming is booming, like, numbers are high,
It is.
but it's sort of like, there's abundance of capital coming into games. So a lot of developers are just like pushing, getting the game out, seeing the numbers, but like what could be done earlier and what could be done regarding like researching like your audience and finding why a game resonates or not. So it's really cool to talk with you, Eli, today.
Well, I'm really happy to be here. As you said, yeah, we've been prepping this one for quite a while now. The opportunity is great. The context where everybody is pretty much at home. The fact that there is a platform like EGD for that is great as well.
Thanks.
I'm really excited to share the stories that our game studios that we work with have shared with us. Some cool stuff, good findings, and yeah, let's get going.
Yeah, Playtest Cloud, like we were using you guys at Next Games for like, I think from 2014 already or 15 for Walking Dead No Man's Land. And like, it was always such a, like a eye-opening moment to see when players can't play the game.
Yeah.
That was, because you're kind of like in the office with your team playing, oh, it's fine. Like there's no bugs here. And then you get a set of videos where people are sort of like swiping somewhere on the screen where nothing is happening. And yes,
Good
but yeah,
findings.
like more of those kind of things coming in a bit. I'll
Yep.
first talk from my perspective. I'll share the screen now here. So can you see, Ili, my screen?
Perfectly, yes.
All right. So my top 5 takeaways from playtesting. So my first kind of experience with playtesting is probably like over 10 years ago, doing our Facebook games in my first startup, where we were doing like focus groups, whatnot, small scale. Back in the day, it wasn't as easy. You needed to kind of find your own testers. Nowadays, there's a lot of services like Playtest Cloud who facilitate the hiring of these people to come in with a small like incentive of paying them to play a game and then talk what they're doing. But yeah, the top 5 for me in my career, first, like there's a lot of people in the community who know me. So I'm Joachim Akren, the founder and CEO of Elite Game Developers, which is a game startup school. That's what I'm kind of calling it at the moment, where I'm putting a lot of content online regarding how to start a company. My background is that I started my first company, Iron Star Helsinki, 15 years ago, which eventually failed. And I went to Supercell to do analytics there for a year and a half. Then mobile started really taking off, free to play. I left to start Next Games with 4 other co-founders, and left last year to start Elite Game Developers, as I mentioned, this new kind of way to educate people into starting and building games companies. Yeah, the first out of my top 5 is sort of like this realization of what is playtesting. So you could really think about this experience of you're bringing in people to try a game, and the developers are sort of like observing what's going on. This was the traditional model. Nowadays, you have these services where you upload a build and you get videos in 24 to 48 hours to watch those videos where somebody's playing the game. But sort of like during Next Games, like the period that I was more or less spending a lot of time facilitating the playtesting effort at Next Games, I realized that it's much more bigger than just watching somebody play your game. So there's in a sense this terminology that it's because it's much broader than just the playtesting. But I figured out this thing called GUR, which stands for Game User Research. It's so much about like what you can like pull out of the player uh, before they start playing, when they're playing, and like why are they coming back, and how do you make them come back more. So from the life cycle of the game coming out, the game being just a concept, you can already apply a lot of this approach that playtesting is only one sliver of this. So I tried to categorize this like into 4 different clouds regarding like what is happening when you're starting to figure out your game. So you have, so I excluded metrics mostly because I believe this is more about this kind of like qualitative data set where you are looking at more about like what is something that you can't quantify, that hey, there's a funnel where you have 100 people not getting through the tutorial, which is very accurate, but that doesn't really tell you why. And then you start going and you might see a bug. Okay, that's obvious, but then there's other stuff that doesn't really come up through metrics, so you always need to have this component of one of these. So I categorize these into playtesting, which is to watch somebody play your game, or to in other ways monitor or measure them playing your game, and more like giving these sentiments about like how it's going, not data. It's again like what can't you do with data, then you turn towards playtesting. And then focus groups, that's even more like drilling down into the questions. Like we did a lot of focus groups at Next Games. We were doing them before we started development on a game to figure out the audience, like for an IP. Since Next Games does IP-based games, we're looking at like a certain IP, like Blade Runner, what the fans of Blade Runner want in a game. What are the experiences there? Then for surveys, we did all sorts of surveys also regarding before the game goes out and after. And player personas, I think that's sort of like where you start like thinking about the motivations of the players. You have a lot of services like Quantic Foundry, 12 Traits, who are looking at this persona data, which you can use to build the game for a particular audience versus not knowing what are the needs, specific needs of your audience. So number 2 takeaway is that what is game user research good for when you only have an idea? Like that focus group that I just mentioned, like if you can bring a group of people to a meeting room, to a location where you can chat with them, and they represent the audience who you are making the game for, you can ask a lot of really interesting questions. What kind of games they play, what kind of knowledge level do they have regarding existing gaming genres? Are they already familiar with match 3 mechanics, for instance, whatnot? And then you can ask also like what is essential in the games that they love, and don't go into asking like, hey, what kind of game would you want to do? I think that never works, where you ask them to design it for you. But it's more about like understanding the realm, their fantasy of what they like, and what the audience will definitely resonate towards if something like that would come along. So we did a lot of these kind of like meeting room setups, but you can also do it like in a cafe. It doesn't need to be as fancy as this setup, as long as you can like have a group conversation and you can somehow take notes and record the discussion. And then surveys, sending out stuff like, because if you can use something like PickFu, which is it's a PickFU is this service that I've at least tried once, where you can like identify groups of people. Like, if you're making a game for the audience who plays a game like Township, like you can use PickFu to identify, for them to actually find people who love township, and then you can start asking questions regarding an audience who would love that game because you're making a game for them. So it's really useful to pull out data. People fill these surveys on their own, and then you get the data and you can start crunching the numbers and looking at what is actually going on. And then finally, the player personas. This is something that you should think about based on what you discovered from the focus groups, what you discovered from the surveys, and then you build this kind of like audience profile for your game. And you can always ask, okay, what would our player think about this decision that we're making with the game right now, which is still in concepting phase, which is in development. We're figuring out, do they like competition? Do they like collaboration? What are their drivers? So going into that realm is super cheap when you're still, at that stage where you can make a lot of early decisions. So yeah, the player persona is actually something that I think still like resonates afterwards. When you have nailed down the persona, you don't need to think about more like, okay, are we making this game for ourselves? You're not asking, do I love the feature that we're adding, but more, is the audience that we decided early on going to be loving what we're doing? So number 3, what is game user research good for when you have a game running? So if you have these 3 focus group surveys, player personas, you're doing these, but then you add playtesting to the mix, which is because you now you have a game running. You can start looking at people experiencing the game. They're playing it on their own. You can, like, allow them to take it home for the weekend. This is what we did a lot with Next Games. We didn't just do external testing, but we did a lot of internal as well to measure sort of like things that were they improving, like, hey, this is the build number 0.1 and it's now going for a weekend test. We measure some results. The team takes those results, improves things, and then a month later we organize another play test where again people are playing. So you don't have the exact audience there internally in your company, but you can at least measure if things are improving for certain aspects which aren't relatable to the audience per se, but they're more or less like understandability, UX, UI, things like that, and some long-term goals. If people are like resonating towards something in the game that they would want to come back for several days and weeks for. And then playtesting can definitely incorporate a lot more than just the actual game. You can think about the funnel as well. You can think about the motivations of the player persona. Are they being surfaced in the game really well? Is the flow of the game like good, that players enjoy the activity that they're doing and getting forward there? And finally, the UX UI bit is really important. That's uh, especially like a Playtest Cloud. That, like when we were doing tests at Next Games for UI UX purposes, Playtest Cloud is absolutely the best because you can get people who have no knowledge about the game, nothing, and they're getting to try it out, and they can't find a button that everybody on your team can find. So there must be some issues. So these are like obvious places to improvements when you do the playtesting properly. Number 4, what are some common mistakes in game user research? So some of these might be really obvious for the users, but like for you guys, but like a buggy client definitely is gonna hurt like a test. Like I remember we were doing the R-World tests where we had augmented reality where you could shoot the zombies with your camera on, and it really wasn't working on all the devices as we thought it would. Discover a lot of issues. When you have some other app running in the background, it might be crashing, all sorts of weird things. Maybe somebody turns it into landscape from portrait and it crashes because it's in the augmented reality mode. So these kind of things, like uh, it's good that you're at least figuring them out through a service like Playtest Cloud. Of course, it would be great to do it beforehand, So you're sort of like not doing the test to just find bugs. You need to be doing it to find this kind of like qualitative improvements for your game. And of course, like if you're doing a paid test and people are commenting your game, you need to be sort of cautious about like if they're saying that, yeah, I love the game. Of course, they love it now. Like, would they love it on their own when they download it from the App Store? It's always, up for a question. Is that the fact? So what you need to do there is then rely into doing surveys with your live audience and figuring out how much are they interested in playing the game. Like you could ask your live players like 1 to 5 question, where 1 is totally disagree and 5 would be totally agree, where you ask like, hey, I'm gonna be playing this game from 1 month from now, or I'm really gonna be playing this game from 1 month from now. So you get this sentiment from people, and then if you ask the question from 100 500 players, you're going to look at like the data and you'll see like, okay, at what level of the game do people start answering uh, like worse, that like it's highly unlikely you're going to come back. So yeah, be wary about the paid tests because of what the people are saying. You need to just observe what they're touching on the screen, and if they're doing things in a way that indicates there's really good flow in how they're playing. So, and asking for design ideas is always tricky. A lot of people, like when I was making like a survey, a lot of people might ask like, hey, can you throw in a question where you're asking like, what would be the next cool feature for the game? And it's sort of, it's tough to actually give that to the players. It's more important to sort of like make your own judgment on that area. If you do these questions, you need to just keep that in mind, that the players aren't really like professional game designers at all, so they don't know what kind of like points to which. So if they come up with a feature that doesn't really like move the needle, that that it won't, like be cautious about those ideas. And then treating soft launch as a playtest, I've seen this happen a lot. It's sort of sad if you end up doing it that way, that like just go out and ask people, your friends, to play the build and watch them play the build. That's the least you could do as a playtest. Like just do that at least. So the last point I wanted to talk about today is like, how should a small startup approach game user research when you have a limited budget or whatnot. But then it really like goes into this realm of going to the outside world and taking the game with you and watching people play it. I think this is the option to do. There's a lot of like stories from Rovio when they were figuring out Angry Birds, and they did a lot of playtesting with like family and friends, and there was this mother test where the mom was playing the game, and if the mom liked it, it's sort of like signal that it has this attractiveness level which sort of like expands past the gamers. So it's sort of like simple enough to pick up for your mom, and that really, and the mom loves it. It indicates that okay, this has broad appeal and it seems to be working. So how do we start testing from here to figure out what is still like wrong in the game? What are the issues? So for small startups, just use your friends and family for this purpose. Figure out like things that where you don't need to spend money to get results, and involve your whole team in this effort to gather data on the game. Yeah, that's my set for today. Just a quick notice that there's elitegamedevelopers.com, have the blog, the podcast. There's a lot of content there. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do. And we're gonna share this recording later there on the site as well. So, but yeah, I'll give it to you, Ili, now.
Nice stuff, nice stuff. I really enjoy your bit on it, the unique perspective as a yeah,
Thanks, man.
like a mobile dev veteran, and the Finland ecosystem, how Rovio made it with homemade GUI. It's cool stuff, cool stuff.
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
So yeah, I guess I'll start sharing my screen, and we'll get
Yeah.
going with my bit.
Yeah, just a reminder to the audience, please put your questions into the Q&A section here in the Zoom if you have anything. We'll happily take those questions from there after Ili's presentation.
Nice, cool. Sharing my screen now. Whoop. Here we go.
Yes.
Nice, cool. So, hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Eli Moreau. I am a project manager at Playtest Cloud. Playtest Cloud is it's a German-based or Berlin-based company that specializes in usability test for mobile games. Right? And I'll start, definitely today talking about my and our clients and partners top discovery while playtesting. But before that, I'll just like to do a just a quick setback on our story, where Playtest Cloud is from, what we do, and are we relevant to talk about playtesting discoveries today. It all started in 2012 when these two gentlemen, Marvin Killing on the left and Christian Ress on the right, founded Playtest Cloud. It started as a school project in their computing science degree, and then it morphed into the company that we know now. Really, really nice story from there. Started from Potsdam, moved to Berlin in Germany. Their vision initially was, and still is, to build a tool, a platform for game studios, for mobile game studios, to help them and help you playtest your game and make better games. Speaking of games, I believe that in 8 years of time, more than 3,500 games were tested on the platform. It just tells you that we are playtesting a lot of games. The variety is just huge, from big blockbuster mobile games to indie games, casual to hardcore, you name it. They probably pretty much all have been playtested on the platform. And the variety doesn't stop with the game, but with the we call them clients, but like the game studios that work with us. You had Next Games back then. We also have like big names, big studios, but not only. And I think that's what makes the strength of the company and the platform, is that this is accessible for pretty much everyone who makes games and at every single stage of your development of the game. So that's I think definitely one of the strengths of Playtest Cloud right now. So as I said, I'm going to share some top stories, just to give you a bit of background on how I prepped this presentation. I've interviewed 4 game studios that you will probably remember, like recognized when I passed the slide. And yeah, we just exchanged via Zoom and email, and I gathered their top stories, and then I'm going to present them to you today. So everything is coming from real game studios with real playtests that happen. Yeah, let's get started with the first top story of the day. And today we'll start with Playdots, an American company that makes a gorgeous puzzle game. And their game is called Two Dots. They contacted us a couple of months back, and Drew, the project manager on Two Dots, or a project manager on Two Dots, had a specific feature in the game that they wanted to playtest, and that's a healthy playtesting habits that they have at Playdots, that they cook their feature in house, and then they playtest this specific feature to our players, right? And they just want to know if the feature is ready to be released, right? They had like one hypothesis when they work on these win streak features, that it could have a negative potential impact. That's something that they were thinking about, but like they needed data. They needed to look at qualitative videos of people experiencing this win streak feature to assess it. And they used a really, really interesting method. So the win streak is a feature that isn't part of the what we call the first time user experience. It's something that I will talk about a lot. FTUE. It's introduced a bit later in the game. I believe it's after the level 38 or something. So they went for a 3 days longitudinal study. That would make total sense, and they did something really interesting. They split their audience into two groups. One group was really experienced with their game, Two Dots. So they were like seasoned players of the game. They knew their way around, and they were actually playing on their own the game. And they used another group, totally new players, fresh pair of eyes, just a blank page, and they really compared these two groups and see how the specific feature of the win streak was perceived with Group A, experience, Group B, newbies. And they had a really nice discovery. So at first, they really thought it would be somehow a bit like have the potential to be somehow negative, but they found out, especially by looking at the newbie group of players, that after a while the players got a bit bored, right? They weren't really like expecting anything new after day two, and at the very end of their playtest they were introduced to this specific feature, and then their appeal for the game, their engagement for the game just went up, and they were really hyped by the game again. Doing win streaks means you stay longer in the game because you don't want to break your win streak, and it's just overall like bring more reward for the players. And it was just a hit. And I need to mention also that the group of seasoned players started their 3-day playtest with a build that had fast forward the first time user experience, because that wasn't really useful because they already played the game. And even these veteran players had really good feedback. So what they did at Playdots is that they decided to take action. They moved things around, and they decided to introduce the win streak earlier on in the FTUE. So it's a bold move that actually paid off, because they got back to us a couple of months ago, and it really had a big impact in in-app purchase, IAP, and conversion rate overall. The game just went up big times with this specific feature. So a simple but well-planned 3 days longitudinal study had actual real money impact for the old company. So this is something great. Kudos to Drew and his team for having like really well prepped and well designed the study. We're moving on to the second study of the day, or second story of the day. This is again another game, another studio, but the method is the same. So we're talking about a 3-day longitudinal as well. Different discoverings though. This first one, this one is coming from InnoGames, so a German game studio based in Hamburg. I had the chance to talk with Malte, a game user researcher there, and they had this new game. So they're doing city builder games, mid-core audience games, right, with a lot of content, long living games. And they had this new game that they really wanted to not finished, just a game being developed, and they wanted to see how the game would be perceived by players over the course of 3 days. So they went for the longitudinal study, and they decided to compare their new games to a one of their legacy games. So their Forge of Empires. That's the actual game that is out there in their portfolio, and they wanted to compare like these newly released but similar to their old games and see how they behave, right? So they wanted to improve retention, improve the FTUE as well. That was their ultimate goal. They had an hypothesis that their new game wasn't finished, so not all the features were there. But they decided there was a bold move. They decided to start their playtest with only a limited amount of available features, like the guild, PvP, and some in-game chats weren't there yet. So they had what they called a light version of the game. And since they wanted to do a kind of A/B test, compare these two, they decided, and that's really clever, to trim a bit their Forge of Empire version of the game. So they created a build and they removed some of the features, so they were kind of equally light versions. And they went for 3 days. They had a look at the players playing their games, and they could compare how the new and the old game behaved, with a focus on the new game, of course. And what they found was again, super interesting. They found out that the version of their game, Forge of Empires, that had little features in the specific test perform better when it comes to retention. So players were, you know, less overwhelmed by features. They had like more time to get to know the game step by step, gradually, as opposed to having a big flow of information, features, possibilities at once. And it really had a big impact. And I'll emphasize the big impact because it kind of changed the way InnoGames design their FTUE. They from a only 3 days longitudinal study. At first, they wanted to only focus on their new games, but they found good findings of their old games that they only used as a kind of guinea pig. And they rechanged the way they introduce features. The tempo of it has been changed as well, and they are going on a more gradual approach now. And it's, you know, increase the retention of their actual game Forge, but also um, open them up for new processes and new approaches. So it had a big impact, and also unexpected. So it lived for the design motto, less is more. That's something that they learned with this specific playtest. We are moving to the third story of the day, and this story is also like the studio Colibri Games, based in Berlin. They have this game called Idle Miner Tycoon, and they were also interested in you know, checking the FTUE, see how players react to their specific first X minute of the game. And one of their, like, you know, KPIs was to improve the day one retention, like all studios in the world. But the way they did it is also super smart. I think they went on a specific process for this one. So they were seeing messages on their app store pages, you know, where you can leave reviews of confused players and confusing messages. Players were obviously, you know, angry at something because they took the time to, you know, write on their keyboard, but nothing was articulated. It was more like, hey, this game cool, but I'm stuck, or lots of unclear feedback. And the hypothesis was that, you know, they also received email in their customer support tool that, yeah, something was wrong, but they couldn't really tell what. And they decided to order a simple playtest, single session, 30 minutes, just to see how players react to the first time user experience. They invited fresh pair of eyes, players who are not experienced with the idle genre, but like casual games, so a potential audience, but no, like they're not really familiar with the core mechanics of the games of the genre. And what I found is also super interesting. It is a double discovery for you today. The first one is one of the UI elements, a key UI element of the tutorial was hidden, missing. And the second one is that a core mechanic of the game, something that is what they call, like, you know, the idle mining game is what they call the bottleneck management. So you just manage 3 channels and then you make them as productive as it can be, and you generate resources, right? I think it's yeah, picture will speak louder than my explanation. We'll go in game just to give you a bit of context, right? So we are looking at the what looks like the one of the first screen that you see when you start the tutorial of the game. This is a vertically structured game where you have a mine, you need to generate resource, and the line that you see, this specific level, is called a mine shaft, right? You're invited in the tutorial to create a second mine shaft to expand your business and make more resources. And to do that, there is a UI feedback. I believe it's a like an arrow that, you know, invited you to scroll down, and then you will see a button similar to the new shaft. You will create your first new shaft and then move on to the tutorial. And for for some players who played on a I believe it's the iPhone SE, the really small screen one, the UI element was missing. So you couldn't see the prompt, the call to action. And then some players just never had the idea that they could even scroll down. So they spent a lot of time manually doing the work of their mining characters, and yeah, it created a lot of frustration. They broke the game, kind of, and that was a big findings. The second one is for players who managed to get the second shaft, so that's the second level. There's this elevator on the left that goes down, gets the resources, bringing it up to a depot, right? And when you unlock your second shaft, your elevator is only blocked to a certain level of a capacity, right? Can only take one payload at a time. So players were complaining that the elevator would never go down to the second shaft, and they were, sending fire message to the support, and it find out that you can actually tap on this part of the elevator and level up your elevator. And by leveling up, you will increase the payload and then reach the second, third, fourth shaft. And this was not abuse, and it led to a lot of frustration for the players. So all in all, they made two big discoveries in a one single 30 minutes playtest, and they took action. They improved the UI for the call to action button. I guess reworked the compatibility with small screens, and they also created a conditional tutorial that triggers if your shaft at level X and your elevator is still blocked at level 1, at some point a prompt will come in into the game and say, hey, your elevator can be upgraded, please do so. And all in all, they increased their day one retention, they decreased the rate that they received on their support. I believe that they increased their overall Google Play and App Store review rate. So all in all, a cheap single session had a lot of impact. The next example is it's a really good one too, and it's brought to you by our friend at Gameloft. They have this game called Lego Unboxed Legacy. So this is a team RPG game on the Lego IP, right? Sorry, and they run a usability test. That's a good playtesting habit that they have to check how the game performed with just doing a little usability check using Playtest Cloud, and they had no clear hypothesis. They just ran for a single session and see how the players behave with it. And they got some good findings. That one of the core mechanic of the game was kind of unclear. I wouldn't say unclear. I think it wasn't really timed, properly timed. And again, we are moving in game because that's where I'll be able to make myself clear. So that's the game, two teams, you're on the left with your characters and you're facing your opponents on the right. Each character can cast spell and select opponents and you defeat them. Now, we are in the tutorial, really early stage of the game, and you have the ability to manually, like it is displayed here, manually select a character with the red aura around him, and that's how you actually like progress and beat your opponents in battles. But in the early version of the game, they introduced a feature before the single selection feature, and that was the taunt mechanic. For those of you who are experienced with the team RPG, this character here, the orange one, is a tank that absorbs damage, basically gets the damage from the enemy to protect his team. And this specific character has an ability called taunt. I think he's pushing up some bells, and the taunt mechanic was also introduced within the enemy team. So you would start the battle and you could, before you knew, you could singly select enemies. You only had the option to, because the taunt mechanic was introduced first, to only select one enemy, the enemy with taunt. And after that, it wasn't really clear that the single select could be used again. So players had their first experience by actually not being able to singly select enemies, which led to some kind of frustration after the other battles because they were like losing too fast. And what the team at Gameloft did is that they did a real like team effort where they introduced a manual targeting first, and after that next battle the taunt mechanic, So they just shifted the order of the mechanics that they were introducing, and then they also worked with their art team to create a big visual feedback. And I'm gonna quote them because it's good. They added a big juicy toned feedback on top of the character, so to make it just real obvious. And overall, yeah, they reduced player confusion and just like made a better game. So kudos to them as well. Um, I think we are running right on time. I do have a bonus for you. It's not per se a top discovery, but it's something that came up while talking with Malte from InnoGames actually. So they've been using us using Playtest Cloud, and they've introduced playtesting in general for quite a long time now. And they Malte told me that he had like he gathered a video of a specifically good video of a player that was right on his target audience, a really well articulated players that just was fluent in the game, right on point, good feedback all the time. Overall, like what you can dream of, like real good players. And he's using this player to share it with the other departments like game design or art and so on, and just say, hey, if you're feeling down at some point, just watch this video because we're making games for them, for players like that. And these players, there are lots of players out there that just love what you're doing, love what we are doing, and it was just like they use it as a feel good video, so it doesn't really bring a lot of discovery to it, but it's just like, hey, we're making good game, we are on a good track, and this real player playing our real game, us waking up every morning to do that, it's just, it makes sense. And I just felt like sharing it. It's a cool story
Mm.
as a bonus. Now I'm just going to finish real quick with a conclusion. I think all of these told us one thing, is that if you want to get find big discoveries and then improve your game, it always starts with the same thing. It's a well planned or a well thought out playtest. No matter what you do, what you use, you need to take time to plan it. Choose the right method, choose the right like like Drew did, and Dots. Look at the right players, and then you will be able to, if you really plan your playtest, you will be able to unlock discoveries after that. I think it's a key part of it. The second one is to embrace the unexpected. It's a beautiful sentence, but it actually means a lot. Whenever you start something, you will confront your game, your work, your part of your life to someone who is potentially going to play your game, and they will say things. They will play your game in a way that you might not be comfortable, familiar with, and there are no bad feedback. If someone is like doesn't know how to play your game and 10 other people know how to play your game, it's still worse to listen to or try to understand why this specific single player didn't see your button or didn't thought about scrolling down on a vertically designed game. Things like that. I think it's the unexpected has a lot to offer. You also need to look at the results objectively. I mean, players, you mentioned, it can be get reward, and you can say, yeah, like them as playtesters are not the same as they would be as players, but whatever they're telling you, like they're using their times, their words, their experience, and even what they're not telling you as a weight. Like I got this story of a someone who played a game in a multiplayer game and then answered a survey, and during the survey we're asked, hey, please tell us what you thought about the multiplayer's experience, and said, up, never played a multiplayer of this game.
Mm.
So the players spent an hour not knowing what they were playing, which mode they were playing. But by looking at the results from the survey, they found out that there was a discrepancy, that players had no clue that they were. So all the data are valuable if you use the like science approach kind of thing.
Mm.
And the last one is, yeah, be ready to make changes. All of these are great discoveries, but they're great changes if you're willing to like change your game, change your FTUE, and yeah, rethink the way you are like interacting with your game. And just like finally, over time now, if you want to know more about, like, we have this blog at Playtest Cloud that is being structured and fed by talented Jake Rundle, our customer success manager. Yeah, lots of good stuff. It is going to be a like hotspot for anyone who is interested in playtesting. Lots of cool stuff, case studies, videos, more to come. I really recommend. If you're interested in playtesting, of course, get in touch with us at Playtest Cloud. We have solutions for pretty much every single type of project at every single stage. So I really encourage you to give it a shot. We'll be able to help. And if you want to keep in touch, talk about player recruitment, Valorant, Red Dead Redemption, or no matter what, just yeah, stay in touch with me. And that's it for me today. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Eli. This was
Yeah,
really good.
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just need to mention one service that I really remember using from you guys was the where you could basically upload a presentation like PowerPoint slides and
The
people from
concept
your
test, yeah. And
yeah
we've
the
been improving the concept test a lot. It is used for like pre-alpha games, just to show the art theme of the game, A/B test. It's really cool. I personally really love the like 2D aspect of it. It's focused on images as opposed to
Yes.
long text, and I personally like them. So yeah,
Yeah, it was really useful. It's sort of like the survey, but a lot more because you can use a lot of visuals and stuff like that.
yeah, visuals are great.
Yeah, and the person can explain something in their own words. They don't need to
Yeah,
write like
it's
100
true.
words.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, it helps. Hey, let's go into the Q&A here. Please just send more. There's few here. I'll ask these and we'll see which one takes which. Uh, why should I playtest my game rather than just soft launch a new feature? What are the benefits? What do you think, Eli?
Hmm. I mean, by playtesting your game, you will get results that you can use and that you can share within your team. I'm just meaning that organizing a playtest, you will get a video, you will get survey data that's real raw data, qualitative or quantitative, that you can use, share, and then like extract the actual insight from. As opposed to a soft launch, of course, you will be backed by you know um, product management tool that will be able to extract data from it. That's absolutely true, but you want to have a feedback. You want to have a player saying like, oh, I really like this character, it makes me think of Kung Fu Panda, and then you won't be able to to get this kind of like level of insight from the player. You won't get their own words, you won't get their own frustration when they will say the F word when they dies 3 times in a row.
Mm,
You won't get that. You will just say player that died at timestamp X, Y, Z. And it speaks louder than just raw data. It is better to share a footage of someone that is extremely frustrated about a specific feature of your game with your project manager, with your UI artist, game designer, than
mm.
just telling like, hey, look at this curve. This curve is showing us that something is wrong. So all in all, soft launch is great. Soft launch is definitely great, but playtesting is somehow invaluable when it comes to players' feedback.
Yeah, one thing comes to mind is that with the playtest video, you can see what people are doing before they interact with the feature and how the interaction with the feature changes what they do afterwards. Like, and it's always good to compare, kind of like to the experience or video where you don't have that feature yet involved. So like earlier versions of the game, like how did the flow go there, like what changes when we add the feature. There's a lot going on there for sure, which just metrics can't really like point out. They can point out like funnel stuff,
Yeah,
what's going on, but it's very restrictive. Yeah.
that's a good question.
Yeah, next question. When I run playtests with kids, what considerations or modifications do I need to make to my playtest test with kids? You probably have seen this.
Yeah, this is a great question, and it's actually good. So at Playtest Cloud, we do have a database of players that are from the US, Canada, and the UK, and we also have the ability to playtest with kids, aged from 3 years old till 15, and there are some, of course, some restrictions or limitations because um, I'm thinking simple things like you don't want to have you need to have a specific type of game for kids, like some of the gore games not going to be play tested for kids. That's the first one. The
Yeah.
content needs to be tailored to a kid audience. Second thing is that at Playtest Cloud, at least, playtesting with kids means playtesting with their parents as well. The parents are the one downloading the game. They are the one who sign up to Playtest Cloud, and they are the one who are with their kids on the couch playing the game. And so you will need and you will have a mixed feedback. You won't have just a 5 year old playing your game. You will have their parents interacting. So it is a bit different. There is an interaction. It's not just one player in a quiet environment. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of mama, what's
Mm.
that? Or I'm
Yeah.
stuck, or it's dinner time, and then the session starts
Yeah.
back. So it is like a snapshot of a like living room. That's the way I think about playtesting with kids. And then you have, of course, the usual stuff. If you're playtesting with a 3 years old, 4 year old, do not ask 20 written questions. Do not expect the players to articulate. They will speak with their own words. They are like growing brains, and you should treat them as such. Like they are not your typical audience, right? They are
Mm.
growing players, growing persons. So yeah,
Yeah.
you have a lot of things like this.
Yeah. Makes sense. Then there's one question here. What consideration do I need to make when I run a playtest with a different type of phone, like such as like iPhone 6s in the Colibri example, was it SE? And then like you have iPhone 12, which is like the biggest iPhone we've ever shipped. So is there like a difference in designing the playtest based on the phone?
um, Designing the playtest, I don't know. I think you need to, like, as you mentioned during your part of the presentation, that was really on point. You want to do the QA before you do playtesting, right? You
Mm.
want to kill as many bugs as you want, as you can before that. You want to have like people from QA just like secure the game, and then when the build is secured, you want it to be shipped to your real players. You're not going
Yeah.
to ship a buggy client to your players anyway. So that's why it's important. So I'd say I see it as a project manager, I see it as a simple technical requirement, the fact that you're changing from a small to a large phone. And if there is an issue with that, if the display doesn't show the downing arrow on a small phone, if your large phone doesn't scale up, it is QA part. It is more QA than playtesting.
Yeah,
I
makes
think
sense.
so.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely like bump into that. Of course, it's like really cool when you can show something that the QA missed. Hey man, this was really fun.
Yeah.
Let's do it again in the future. Like more game user research and playtesting stuff is really useful to share. I think it's like still so kind of like underutilized, the whole understanding that's going on. And but yeah, let's keep things rolling. Hopefully we get out of the COVID so I can visit Berlin soon.
Oh, man, you'll be more than welcome. And yeah, traveling to Europe would be nice as well.
Yeah.